Boots struck dry earth, each step sinking shallow into the dust. The windmill creaked overhead, its blades whining like a wounded animal. The rider had left his horse tied at the fence. Better the beast rest than stumble on rotten boards that barely stood against the wind. The farmhouse loomed ahead, its paint peeled to bone, porch sagging as though ready to drop into the earth. No voices, no sound but the wind dragging itself across brittle grass. His hand hovered over the revolver at his hip. The door groaned open before he could reach it. 3 shadows filled the threshold, tall enough their heads brushed the top beam. They stepped forward, the porch groaning under their weight. Boots broad as shovels struck the wood with a sound that carried. Dust rolled from the rafters. They weren't spirits, nor the fever-dream shapes of a man too long under the sun. They were flesh, strong and unyielding, eyes hard as hammered steel. "You're going to stay with us," they said, voices braided together, low and certain. The soldier's throat tightened. His fingers brushed the worn handle of the Colt, but the weight of their gaze stilled him. They weren't pleading. They weren't threatening. They were laying down law. The eldest, her hair streaked with gray, her shoulders broad as a ranch gate, studied him as though measuring what kind of man had walked into their ground. The second carried a scar, deep and jagged, running down from brow to cheek. The third's hands, rough and scarred from work, hung loose by her sides, yet every finger twitched like they held tools of war unseen. The wind fell silent. Even the barn door, loose on its hinge, stopped its restless banging. He swallowed. Didn't come here for trouble. The eldest tilted her chin toward the fields, where dry stalks whispered in the fading light. This land chooses who stays. Men before you tried. None stayed. The second scar caught the fire of the setting sun, glowing like a fresh wound. Her mouth curved, not in a smile, but in something sharper. You stepped on soil that remembers. Behind them, the house breathed, shutters rattling, boards settling with groans like an old beast at rest. The soldier shifted his stance, dust swirling at his boots. His shoulders sagged with years carried too far, too long. He knew he should turn, climb back on his horse, ride until darkness swallowed him whole. Yet something in their words, in the immovable way they stood, pressed him deeper into the dirt. "You're going to stay with us," they repeated, softer now, but no less final. The sun dropped behind the ridge, bleeding red across the desert. Shadows stretched long. The farm, the sisters, the silence. All of it closed around him like the pages of a story he hadn't meant to walk into, but one that had already begun writing itself the moment his boots touched the soil. The fire popped, spitting sparks against the soot-blackened stone. Shadows of 3 women stretched tall against the walls, taller still in the soldier's weary eyes. He sat with his back to the hearth, one hand resting near his rifle though he hadn't touched it since stepping inside. The eldest stirred a pot, the ladle scraping slow circles. The smell of beans and smoke filled the air, heavy bitter. The scarred one leaned against the window frame, her silhouette sharp in the thin slice of moonlight that cut through the cracked glass. The youngest traced her thumb along the edge of a brass button strung on a leather cord, each piece clicking soft against the other. None of them spoke for a long while. Only the wind pressed at the shutters, rattling them like loose bones. Finally, the eldest broke the silence. "This was ours long before you came." Her voice was low, steady, meant not to persuade but to remind. The soldier kept his gaze on the flames, their dance catching in his hollow eyes. The scarred one's voice cut sharper. "Men took it. Men bled it dry. Left us with nothing but the dirt and the ghosts buried in it." The youngest raised the necklace, buttons gleaming like dull coins. "They thought we'd break." Her words held no tremor. "But they broke first." The soldier's jaw tightened. He had heard stories like this before, families burned out, women left to fend with ash and gun smoke. But never told in such voices, deep as canyon stone, certain as the desert night. Outside, coyotes wailed, long and mournful. The sound crawled through the cracks of the house, winding around them all. The soldier shifted, but the sisters did not. Their stillness was heavier than any chain. The firelight caught the scarred sister's face, the old wound glistening like it had never healed. She did not hide it. She stared at him until he felt his bones shrink under the weight. "Why am I here?" His voice rasped low, like he didn't mean for it to escape. The eldest dipped the ladle, poured beans into a tin bowl, and set it in front of him. The steam fogged the air between them, because the land wanted it. Her answer offered nothing, yet it settled like a verdict. The soldier ate without tasting, each bite thick as dust. The sisters did not join him. They watched, silent, patient, as if measuring the way he chewed, the way he breathed. When a meal was done, the youngest laid the necklace across the table. The brass buttons gleamed in the firelight, stamped with eagles and numbers he knew too well. Military relics, taken from coats long rotted under the ground. The soldier's hand hovered near them, then pulled back. His chest tightened. The eldest leaned forward, her shadow swallowing the flame. "This land remembers, and so do we." The fire crackled louder, as if it too was listening. Hooves thundered down the dry wash, a low rumble rolling across the land before the dust rose. The soldier stood at the fence line, eyes narrowed against the glare, watching the cloud build where the trail bent from town. Inside the yard, the sisters moved without hurry. The eldest hauled a whetstone across the edge of an axe, the scrape steady, sure. Sparks leapt, fell, died in the dirt. The scarred one oiled the hinge of a long rifle, each click and pull precise. The youngest stacked cartridges in neat rows on the table, brass glinting like a row of teeth waiting to bite. The soldier's hand dragged across the rough wood of the fence rail. His knuckles whitened. His horse shifted behind him, restless, smelling the storm that drew near. The first rider came into view, black hat pulled low, coat flapping in the wind. Behind him, 5 more, hard-faced men, rifles slung, dust clinging to their coats like a second skin. At their center rode the cattle baron, thick-bodied, a sneer riding his mouth as easy as he rode his horse. The soldier felt his chest tighten. His gaze drifted to the barn. He crossed the yard, boots striking hard, each step heavier than the last. The barn door resisted, its hinge groaning. Inside, the air was thick with old straw and forgotten years. A chest sat beneath the rafters, iron corners rusted, leather straps cracked. He knelt, pulled it open. The smell of oil, leather, and iron rose sharp, familiar. A long rifle, polished though long buried, lay wrapped in a faded Union coat. Beneath it, metals dulled with time, buttons green with age. His hand closed over the stock. The wood knew him. The scarred sister appeared at the doorway, her face half-shadowed. She said nothing, only gave a single nod. The soldier lifted the rifle. For a moment his shoulders straightened, not with pride, but with the weight of something long carried, never laid down. He stepped back into the light. The rider slowed, fanning across the ridge above the farm. Dust rolled down the slope like smoke from a cannon shot. The cattle baron's voice carried, sharp and thick. "You don't belong here. That land's mine." The eldest sister raised her axe high on her shoulder. "Come take it." The scarred one chambered around with a sound that split the silence. The youngest stood in the yard, cartridges at her feet, her stare fixed steady on the ridge. The soldier climbed the ladder to the loft, rifle cradled, barrel resting on the ledge. The wood was warm beneath his cheek. He slowed his breath, steady, the way he had on other mornings, other wars. The hoofbeats shook the ground, closer now, rattling the walls, shaking dust from the rafters. The sisters stood unflinching. The soldier's finger rested near the trigger. Gunfire cracked sharp as lightning. The ridge erupted with smoke. Horses screamed, men shouted, the dust turning the air into a choking storm. The soldier's rifle thundered once, twice, thrice, each shot finding its mark. A rider toppled backward, another folded over his saddle, a third spun sideways before his boots even touched the dirt. Below, the sisters met the charge head-on. The eldest swung her axe with both hands, the blade splitting wood, bone, whatever dared come near. The scarred one braced her rifle against the fence, each round hammering through the smoke. The youngest loaded, passed, reloaded, her hands moving so fast the brass clinked in a rhythm that beat against the chaos. The cattle baron roared, his voice cutting through the storm. He pushed his horse forward, revolver blazing, spitting fire toward the porch. Bullets slammed into the posts, splinters flying. The soldier shifted, lining the rifle. The world shrank to a bead of iron, the baron's chest filling the sight. His finger tightened. Then the eldest sister cried out, stumbling as a bullet ripped her shoulder. The baron raised his gun again, grinning wide, ready to finish her. The soldier dropped from the loft. Boots hit dirt hard. He strode into the open, rifle held loose at his side, no cover between him and the baron. Dust swirled around his legs, smoke choking the dawn. "Me," he called, voice raw, carried by the wind. The baron turned, revolver swinging toward him. The sisters froze, eyes locked on the soldier's back. He did not lift the rifle. He stood tall, shoulders squared, chest bared to the gun. His face was carved from stone, his silence heavier than 1,000 words. The baron sneered, pulled the trigger. But before the hammer fell, the scarred sister's shot rang out, splitting the morning like thunder. The baron jerked, eyes wide, slumping in the saddle before crashing to the ground. Silence broke slow, crawling across the yard. Smoke drifted. Horses scattered. The last of the gunmen fled down the wash, their shouts swallowed by the wind. The soldier stood still in the clearing dust, rifle hanging forgotten at his side. The sisters came to him, blood on their clothes, soot in their hair, eyes bright as fire. The eldest laid a hand on his arm. The youngest lifted the necklace of brass buttons, fastened it into his palm. The scarred one only nodded, the kind of nod men once gave him before a battle. Acknowledgement, respect, bond. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of gunpowder and sweat into the wide desert. An old voice would later tell it by the fire. How the sisters fought like giants, how the soldier faced death unarmed, and how the land itself seemed to rise with them. Some swore he stayed until his last breath, guarding them as kin. Others whispered he walked away into the desert, his shadow long and unbroken. But all agreed on one thing. That morning, justice stood taller than any man alive.